At Easter dinner, my brother's son kicked my plate onto the floor and said, "Eat like the dog you are." My father took his side. I just put on my coat and left. Before midnight, I made one call and went to sleep. At 8:03 a.m., my brother reached for his car keys. And then, "Hey, welcome back, and if you're new here, welcome. We'd love to have you stick around." Hit that subscribe button before we start. It's a small thing that makes a big difference for us. We're building something here, and your support is what drives it all. Thanks for being here. Let's get into it. My nephew is 12 years old. He kicked my plate off the table at Easter dinner and said, "Eat like the dog you are." He said it in front of 9 people. My father looked at me, not at the boy, and said, "He's just a kid. Don't make a scene." I didn't make a scene. I put on my coat. I walked to my car. And before midnight, I made one phone call that changed everything my brother would see when he woke up the next morning. My name is Derek. I am 36 years old, and this is the story of a plate that hit the floor in a car that disappeared from a driveway. Let me start with the car, because the car is the thing nobody at that table knew about. 14 months ago, my brother Craig wanted to lease a new SUV. His credit was too low to qualify. The dealership needed a co-signer. Craig called me. I drove over on a Saturday morning and signed the paperwork. The registration went under my name because the lease required it. Craig drove the car off the lot. He has been driving it ever since. He covers about 60% of the monthly payment. I cover the rest plus the insurance premium. And he has never asked what the full cost is. He pays what I told him to pay and assumes the rest handles itself. The lease is in my name. The insurance is on my policy. Craig drives a car that belongs to me on every document that matters. Nobody at that Easter table knew any of this. Now let me tell you about the word dog. 6 months ago, I overheard my brother on the phone. I was at his house helping him fix a fence post in the backyard. He was inside. The kitchen window was open. He was talking to his friend Mike. He didn't know I could hear him. My brother, he's the family dog, follows everyone around, does what he's told, eats whatever they give him. He laughed. Mike laughed. Muscle, I stood in the backyard holding a post-hole digger and heard my brother describe me to his friend, using the exact word his son would use at Easter dinner 6 months later. I didn't say anything. I finished the fence. I drove home. I filed the sentence away. The pattern didn't start at Easter. Last July, at a family barbecue, Marcus took my car keys off the kitchen counter and hid them in the backyard. I spent 20 minutes looking for them while he watched from the porch, grinning. When I found them under a lawn chair, he said, "You should see your face." My brother said, "He's just messing with you." My father said, "Lighten up." I called Craig after the barbecue, calm. I said, "Your son is getting disrespectful. The key thing wasn't funny. You need to talk to him." Craig said, "He's 12. He doesn't mean it." I called him again after another incident. Same tone, same calm. This is becoming a pattern. If you don't correct it, I'm going to stop coming to these things. Craig said, "Maybe if you didn't take everything so seriously, he wouldn't mess with you." 2 warnings, 2 dismissals. Easter was the 3rd incident. There would not be a 4th. Now let me tell you about the plate. Easter Sunday, my parents' house, 9 people at the table. My father at the head, my mother at the other end. Craig and his wife Lisa on one side with Marcus between them. Me on the other side between my cousin Sarah and my Aunt Carol. The table was set with my mother's good china. Cloth napkins folded into triangles. A centerpiece of yellow flowers she spent the morning arranging. Ham, scalloped potatoes, green beans, dinner rolls. The food was good. The room smelled like Easter. The company was the same as always. Marcus had been kicking the table leg for 10 minutes. Rhythmic, steady. The kind of kicking a 12-year-old does when nobody tells him to stop, and he knows nobody will. The vibration traveled through the wood. My water glass trembled. A bread roll shifted on my plate. Nobody said a word. Craig was telling a story about a golf trip. Lisa was nodding along. My father was listening with the attentive interest he reserves for Craig's life and withholds from mine. The kicks got closer to my side of the table. I could feel them getting harder. Not accidental. Aimed. The boy was looking at me with each kick, checking to see if I would say something. Testing the boundary the way a child tests any boundary. Pushing until someone pushes back. Nobody pushed back. Then one kick landed directly on the edge of my plate. The plate flipped off the table. Ham, scalloped potatoes, green beans, and gravy went airborne for a split second and then hit the floor. The plate landed face down on the hardwood with a crack that stopped every conversation in the room. Food splashed across the floor. Gravy hit my shoes. A piece of ham slid across the wood and stopped against the table leg. A green bean landed on my mother's clean floor next to the centerpiece she'd arranged that morning. The room went silent. Not the silence of shock, the silence of waiting. 9 people looking at the scene on the floor and then looking at one person to see what would happen next. Marcus looked at me, not with guilt, not with shame, not with the face of a child who knows he did something wrong, with the calm, curious expression of a 12-year-old who has learned through a year of uncorrected experiments that he can do anything to this particular adult without consequence. He said it clearly, not mumbled, not whispered, not under his breath. He said it at the table, at volume, in front of 9 people, with the specific confidence of a child who has been given permission by every adult in his life to say exactly this. Eat like the dog you are. The word dog landed on the table heavier than the plate. It sat in the air. It didn't dissipate. 9 people heard it, 9 people processed it, and 9 people waited to see who would correct a 12-year-old boy for calling a grown man a dog at Easter dinner in front of his entire family. The person who spoke was my father. He did not speak to Marcus. He did not speak to Craig. He spoke to me. Iman, he's just a kid. Don't make a scene. He said it while reaching for his wine glass. Casual. The tone of a man managing a minor disruption at dinner, not witnessing his grandson publicly humiliate his son with a word the boy learned from the son the father prefers. He didn't look at Marcus. He didn't tell Craig to handle his child. He looked at me, the man with food on his shoes, and told me the problem was mine to absorb. My mother was sitting directly across from me. She saw the kick. She heard the word. She watched the gravy splash across my shoes and the ham slide across her clean floor. Her hands moved to the edge of the table. Her chair started to push back. She was about to stand up. Then she looked at my father. He shook his head. One small movement. So small that nobody else at the table saw it. But I saw it, and she saw it. And she put her hands back in her lap and looked down at her plate. She had the instinct to intervene. He killed it with a look. Craig smirked. I saw it from across the table. Not a laugh, a smirk. The specific expression of a man watching something he finds privately entertaining happen in public. The corners of his mouth lifted for less than a second. Then he looked down at his plate and kept eating. He did not correct Marcus. He did not say sorry. He did not get up to help me clean the food off the floor. He kept eating ham while his son's word hung in the air over the table. I looked around the room. Sarah was staring at her plate with the rigid posture of a person who is trying to decide if speaking up is worth the cost. Aunt Carol was studying the centerpiece like she had never seen flowers before. Ray Lisa was cutting her food into pieces so small they could have been served to a bird. My mother's hands were in her lap. My father was sipping wine. Marcus was watching me. 9 people, and not one of them said a word. Not one handed me a napkin. Not one told a 12-year-old to apologize for calling an adult a dog at a dinner table. I looked at the food on the floor. I looked at my shoes. I looked at Marcus, who was watching me with the expression of a child who had just confirmed something he already believed. This man will take anything. I stood up. I didn't say a word. I walked to the front closet. I took my coat off the hanger. I put it on slowly. I zipped it. My father's voice came from the dining room. Where are you going? Home. You're overreacting. I turned. I looked at him through the doorway. And he was still holding his wine glass. My food was still on the floor 3 feet from his chair. His grandson was still sitting at the table without a word of correction. And the man telling me I was overreacting had not moved from his seat. You'll know by morning. I opened the front door. I walked to my car. The door closed behind me. The last thing I heard before it shut was Craig's voice. Distant, casual. He'll get over it. He always does. I sat in the car for 2 minutes. Engine off. Hands on the steering wheel. The leather was cold. The street was dark. Through the window I could see the warm light of my parents' dining room. The shapes of people still seated. Still eating. The dinner continuing without me the way a machine continues when you remove a part it never needed. I was not deciding whether to go back. However, I was deciding what to remove. The decision was not emotional, it was structural. What do I hold that connects my life to his? What disappears from his driveway if I make one phone call tonight? I drove home. The drive took 14 minutes. I didn't play music. I didn't call anyone. I drove in silence. The kind of silence that a family mistakes for surrender because they have never seen what it looks like when it's targeting. I got home. I took off my coat. I hung it on the hook by the door. The coat that I put on at 7:14 p.m. in front of a room full of people who watched me leave and did nothing. The coat that became the line between the man who tolerated and the man who acts. I took off my shoes. The gravy had dried on the leather, brown streaks across the toe, the residue of a 12-year-old's lesson in what the family allows. I put them by the sink. I showered. I made a cup of tea. I sat on the couch. The apartment was quiet. The clock on the wall said 8:47 p.m. Easter dinner was still going at my parents' house. Craig was probably on his second helping. Marcus was probably on his iPad. My father was probably on his third glass of wine. My mother was probably in the kitchen cleaning the food off the floor, the food her grandson put there, the food her husband told me to absorb. I sat on the couch for almost 3 hours. I was not stewing. I was not playing the scene on a loop. I was not calling anyone to vent or process or ask for advice. I was doing something more specific, something I had been trained to do by years of working in project management. I was assessing inventory. What do I hold? The lease agreement was in a folder in my desk drawer. I pulled it out. I opened it on the coffee table. My name on the first page. My signature on the third. My credit score on the application. The VIN number. The make. The model. The address where the vehicle is regularly parked. Craig's house. The insurance policy was in the same folder. My policy number. Craig listed as an authorized driver. The monthly premium that comes from my checking account on the 15th of every month without Craig ever seeing the bill. The banking app on my phone showed 14 months of gap payments. Everyone on time, everyone silent. I scrolled through them, month after month. Craig's partial payment coming in at $340. My gap payment going out at $225 to cover the difference. 14 months. I looked at it all spread out on my coffee table. The full paper trail of a man who had been quietly keeping his brother's car on the road for over a year, while his brother's son learned to kick plates and say dog at family dinners. Craig didn't know any of this. Not the real number. Not the insurance cost. Not the registration detail. He knew I co-signed. He knew I helped with the payment. He did not know that the car was mine on every document that matters and is only on the assumption that I would keep paying. Assumptions can change. At 11:40 p.m., I picked up my phone. I called the leasing company's after-hours recovery line. I identified myself as the registered owner. I provided the VIN, the policy number, the address where the vehicle was parked. I had every number memorized because I had been staring at the paperwork for 2 hours. And I'd like to request a voluntary repossession pickup. Yes, sir. When would you like the vehicle retrieved? Tomorrow morning, between 6 and 8 a.m. We'll have a driver there. Is the vehicle locked? Yes, you'll need to tow it. Understood. Anything else? No, that's everything. The call took 7 minutes. I spoke clearly. I answered every question. The operator confirmed the pickup. I said, that's fine. I hung up. I sat on the couch for another 10 minutes. Not second-guessing. Settling. The way a building settles after construction is complete. The structure was built. The tow truck was scheduled. The driveway that held my brother's car for 14 months would be empty by sunrise. I went to bed. I slept better than I had in months. 8:03 a.m., Monday morning. When Craig walked out his front door the way he walks out every Monday morning. Coffee in one hand, car keys in the other, jacket over his arm. The routine of a man whose life runs on schedule and whose schedule runs on other people's money. He pressed the unlock button on the key fob. Nothing beeped. He looked up. The driveway was empty. Not empty like the car was down the street. Empty like the car had never been there. The space where the SUV had been parked for 14 months was a rectangle of clean concrete. Faint oil stains marked where the engine used to sit. The morning sun hit the empty space and it looked like a missing tooth in a smile. Craig stood there. He walked to the curb. He looked both ways down the street. Nothing. He walked back. He pressed the fob again. 3 times. Fast. Like pressing harder would make the car appear. Nothing beeped. Nothing flashed. Nothing responded. He called the police non-emergency line. He reported the car stolen. He gave them the plate number, the color, the model. He was calm, professional, a man reporting a crime. They ran the plates. They called him back 20 minutes later. "Sir, the vehicle was retrieved by the registered owner. It hasn't been stolen. It's been repossessed." "That's impossible. I'm the owner." "Sir, the registration shows a different name. The vehicle was picked up by a licensed recovery service at the request of the registered owner at approximately 6:45 this morning." Craig stood in his empty driveway, coffee getting cold, keys to nothing in his hand. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a sentence was forming that he did not want to finish. The registered owner, the cosigner. Number, the man whose name is on every piece of paper connected to this car. The man whose plate his son kicked onto the floor 20 hours ago. Craig called me at 8:24. I looked at the screen. I let it ring. 8:31. Again. I let it ring. 8:45. Again. My father called at 9:12. I let it ring. My mother texted at 9:30. "Craig is very upset. Please call him." I read it. I put the phone face down on the counter. I made breakfast. I had eggs, toast, coffee. I ate slowly. I chewed every bite. I was in no rush. The man who couldn't give me 90 seconds of defense at Easter dinner could wait a few hours for a phone call. I picked up at noon, on my schedule, when I was ready. Craig was already talking when I answered. "Where is my car?" "It's not your car. It never was. The lease is in my name. The registration is in my name. The insurance is on my policy. I've been covering the gap on your payments for 14 months. I had it picked up this morning." "You can't do that." "I already did." "This is about Easter? About a plate? You took my car over a plate of food?" "I took my car back because your son kicked my dinner onto the floor, called me a dog in front of 9 people, and you sat there and smiled. Not frowned, not corrected, smiled. Dad was right. You're overreacting. A scene is loud and temporary. A phone call is quiet and permanent. Silence. A long one. The kind where you can hear someone rethinking, but not fast enough. You need to bring that car back, Derek. Call Dad. Tell him your brother took the car because his feelings got hurt at Easter. See if Dad says you're overreacting. See if he tells you to figure it out. See how his advice sounds when it's pointed at you instead of me." Craig hung up. My father called that afternoon. His voice had the tone of a man who has been asked to solve a problem he considers beneath him, but has been forced to address because his preferred son is standing in an empty driveway. "Your brother says you took his car." "I took my car. The lease is mine. The registration is mine. The insurance is mine. I've been paying the gap every month for 14 months. This is ridiculous. Over a kid's prank? Your grandson kicked my plate off the table and told me to eat like a dog, in front of 9 people, at Easter, in your house, and you told me not to make a scene. He's 12, Derek. His father calls me the family dog behind my back. His son repeated it to my face, in front of the whole family. I know, and you defended the boy and told me to absorb it. That's not a prank. That's a system, and the system just lost a car. You need to fix this. I fixed it last night. The car is where it belongs, with the person whose name is on the paper. You should be glad I waited until everyone was asleep. This isn't how family works. This is exactly how this family works, Dad. You protect the ones who disrespect and punish the ones who tolerate. The only thing that changed is I stopped tolerating." He was quiet. I could hear him breathing. The breathing of a man who is used to making one statement that ends a conversation, and for the first time in decades, the conversation didn't end. I hung up. Craig couldn't get to work without the car. He lived 25 minutes from his office with no bus route. He borrowed Lisa's car for a week. When everything in his household got harder, everything took longer. Craig was not a man who was used to asking for things. Now he had to ask for everything. He asked our father for help buying a replacement. Our father said he would look into it. He did not write a check. The patriarch who defended a 12-year-old's right to kick a plate was not willing to spend $1 fixing the consequence. My cousin Sarah called me 2 days after Easter. Her voice was careful and certain at the same time. The voice of someone who has been thinking about what they saw and has finished thinking. I saw everything, Derek. I saw Marcus kick the plate. I heard what he said. I saw your dad tell you not to make a scene while the food was on the floor 3 feet from his chair. And I saw Craig smirk. I should have said something. I didn't. And I'm sorry. You're the only person who's apologized. Craig told the table you'd get over it after you left. He said, he'll get over it. He always does. Like it was a weather report. He always does. That's what made them comfortable. They were so used to me absorbing it that they forgot I was choosing to. Choices can change. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then she told me one more thing. The thing that confirmed what I already knew, but had never heard said out loud by someone outside my own head. You know Craig calls you that, right? The family dog. He's been saying it for years. At dinners you're not at barbecues when you leave early. He thinks it's funny. He doesn't know that his kid just performed it at the Easter table word for word. His son didn't think it was a joke. His son thought it was a fact. That's the problem, isn't it? That's the whole problem, Sarah. The boy said what the room believes. He just forgot to whisper. Months later, Marcus asked his grandmother why his uncle doesn't come to family dinners anymore. She said, he's busy. Marcus said, is it because of what I said? She didn't answer. The boy sat with the silence, and for the first time, the silence taught him something that every adult in his life had failed to teach him for 12 years. That words have weight, that plates don't just land on floors, they land on people. And the people they land on can leave. And when they leave, they take things with them that you didn't know they were holding up. I didn't attend the next 3 family events. My mother called before each one. Will you be there? No. When are you coming back? When someone at that table corrects the boy. Poor Mom, when someone tells Craig it's not a joke. When someone says what happened at Easter was wrong. Not in a text, not in private, at the table. Until then, I have other plans. She said, I understand. And I believe she did. She was the one who almost stood up. She was the one who got told to sit down with a look. Craig got a new car eventually. Lower model, higher interest rate, no co-signer. He pays every dollar himself for the first time in his adult life. I heard about it from Sarah. I felt nothing, not satisfaction, not guilt, the absence of any feeling at all. That absence was the clearest sign that the connection was finished. When you feel nothing about someone's difficulty, you are no longer in the same story. The following Easter, I cooked at my apartment. Small. Sarah came. 2 friends from work. I made ham because I like ham and because I was not going to let a 12-year-old's words ruin a food I enjoy. I set the table for 4. I carried my plate from the kitchen. I set it down. Nobody kicked it. Nobody touched it. Nobody told me where to sit or what to eat or how to react when someone disrespects me at a table I'm sitting at. The plate sat exactly where I put it. I picked up my fork. I took a bite. The food was warm. The room was quiet. Sarah was telling a story about her week. My friend was pouring wine. The evening was small and ordinary and completely mine. The plate stayed where I put it. Thanks for staying until the end. If this one hit something, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.